Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sibme Coach Replay Show. I'm your host, Cory Camp. The Coach Replay Show is all about coaching and leadership and supporting our teachers or teachers, if you are viewing, in your classrooms, but also how we can utilize video in these strategies and technology to do what we do any better than we can. So today I'm super excited to have back one of our previous featured coaches and guests on the show. She was on our show last year several times for a series on math language routines. She's back to talk about another math language routine today. The last time she was on our show, though, I was on my very last trip out of state. I was down in Texas visiting family. She was getting ready to go on a trip, and then it was March. So we all know what happened last year this time. So it's been almost a full 12 months since Amy's been on, but this is Amy Youngblood. She's not only a coach here at Sibme, one of our elite team members in the virtual coaching department, but she's also the founder and executive director for EduOptimists, and she provides professional development primarily in leadership, mathematics, and assessment. But she also enjoys in her free time spending time with her husband, adult children, and dogs. How are you, Amy?
Oh, I'm wonderful. I am, we've been getting out just a little bit this month, so I'm happy to get out of the house a little bit, and happy and excited to be here with you today and to be talking about math.
Yes. So today's episode is actually a request from a viewer. We had a comment on our YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel to get access to our show every time we go live, be sure to like and follow and subscribe to us on your favorite platform. But they asked specifically for an episode where you, Amy, would come in and talk with us a little bit about MLR number 8. And MLR is math language routines. Check out our YouTube playlists on all of the previous episodes with Amy Youngblood, but I'm sure she'll give us just a little bit of a debrief on what those are for those who are new to it. But that's what we're talking about, is MLR number 8 today. So I'll let you take it away, Amy.
Thank you. So as you said, MLRs are the math language routines. And we have talked about the importance of them in the past. And really, for somebody that is just joining us today, they really should go back and watch episode 1. I'm not sure actually what episode it is, but the first one of the math language routines. And because we did kind of dig deep into what a math language routine was before we talked about kind of our first example. But they really are meant to support students' mathematical language development, and they were specifically created for our newcomers. But what we found, of course, was they were great for all our students and great to help them develop those language skills that we need in math. And so the last time we were together, we talked about collect and display. And as you said, that's been almost a year ago. And today we're going to talk about MLR 8, which is discussion support.
Yeah, and we've got that link there in the comments if you want to go back to that playlist and watch those another time. And that very first one is an in-depth description of what math language routines are. But let's dive into MLR number 8 today. So what are discussion supports? What does that mean when we're talking about math and these language routines?
So the discussion supports is probably one that people are actually most familiar with. Some of the others, right, they have some names, and we talked about InfoGap, and that was completely new to a lot of people, I think. And you and I demonstrated that on air, and it was a lot of fun. But discussion supports are something that a lot of teachers have been doing all along, and that is providing sentence frames and question stems. And so it's really something that lots of teachers have been doing in their classrooms for lots of years. And there's a little bit more to it, but it's really providing those supports to students to help them have deep discussions around mathematics in their classroom.
Yeah, and this is something that, we in previous episodes, we talked about how Amy always likes to have me do math on air. Not that I can't, but it does take my brain a little bit more than if it was like poetry or ELA, because that's, more of my wheelhouse. But I'm always willing to do math with Amy. She does such a good job of supporting my thinking. However, the same thing that we understand, it sounds very similar to what I know in ELA in discussion supports. When we want to support the academic language, which in this case is the math language, providing things like sentence stems and, sentence starters and questions, those are really good scaffolds for our students. And even when we don't think that they maybe need them, it can help them kind of stay on the same page. So for some of our students who can talk a little bit more eloquently about the concepts and use the language, it also supports them in being able to have more equitable conversations. I know at least in ELA that's the case. So
absolutely, it helps level that playing field and helps provide that scaffold that students need to be able to participate in that conversation. And when you not only then add that to maybe a word wall that has the content words that you are using, then your students can really have that powerful conversation of having the sentence frame to support the conversation side of it, and then a word wall to help support their content side, to marry that together and to be able to have that powerful conversation that leads to that deep understanding of content.
Yeah, and I'm going to pull up an example that you had shared, and I know that you and I were talking about this before. It's not like this is some holy grail kind of example. We will put these in the notes and takeaway. You can find sentence stems, discussion starters, just with a quick Google search, but we've got a few here that we'll put in the notes and takeaways for today's episode if you need them. And just for those who are listening in the podcast, some of the sentence stems are, I noticed that, so I decided to, or I agree because, I disagree because, and then jumping down to some of the question frames, how did you, why did you, what did you? And I want to start with the sentence stems just briefly, because again, it's not so much that they are able to pronounce the math vocabulary and be able to use it correctly. But when we're really talking about these language routines, it is about the conversation, and that's a reciprocal piece. And so what I love about these sentence stems is it does help that back and forth conversation among peers as they are having these conversations. So I love that about these sentence stems, kind of helping them think about the conversation. It's not just one partner or one of the students doing all the talking, but then it helps them to clarify and helps them to state different ways. A different way to do that is, or that makes sense because, so it really helps them dive deeper into their thinking, right? And that's what a lot of these math language routines are about. It's not just using the language of math, but using that as we think about how our minds are developing and inside those concepts.
Absolutely. And one of my suggestions would be to teachers, of course, it's great to put these on your wall and to have them on anchor charts. And, I love anchor charts. I love chart paper. But I would also include that these are probably even more powerful in the hands of children. And so, maybe laminating them on small cards, or making sure that they are taped to children's desks or something, or they're in a math notebook where children have access to them when they need them, right? Because we know that at some point on the wall, children habituate to them. And they won't pay the attention to them that they might if they're somewhere on their desk. And I, as the teacher, say, don't forget to use your sentence stem oh, well, they're right here in front of me, versus I have to look all around the room for them and try to find them. And I'm having a conversation with my peer. Well, my back may be to the chart, and I may not be able to see it depending on where I'm sitting in the room. And so I would really encourage teachers to think about, how can I make sure that my kids have access to these all the time? And the thing about the sentence stems and the question frames, they're really not that different between all the subject areas.
Right.
Like, I would go out on a limb here and say these certainly could be used in science and probably ELA and social studies too, right? There's not that many differences. And so this isn't something that is going to be limited necessarily just to math.
Or a specific grade level, right? Or right. area within math.
Exactly. And so your word walls are going to be more limited and more subject driven, as they should be. And those are an important part of this, because we still have to have that math language, and we need to use that math language and use it correctly, or whatever content language we're using.
Right, right. And again, pronunciation is big, making sure that students do know how to correctly pronounce words so that they can confidently use them in conversation. But also spelling is a big important part too, because as they are reading independently, coming across that over a state assessment, they need to be able to recognize that's the word that we've all been using inside our classroom. So I like to add that anytime we talk about vocabulary as a good reminder. And one thing that I used to do with sentence stems in my classroom is sometimes I would pick specific ones that I wanted them to use. Like, so for example, we're gonna share our process as we work with problem number 5. And when you share what you did, I want you to use the "I noticed that, so I decided to" stem. And then partner 2, you're going to either agree or disagree. And you can use the "I agree because" or "I disagree because." So you can help them start to practice these different stems.
Yeah. I've observed a teacher that told students that today we're looking at another student's work and we are not agreeing with what they did or disagreeing or telling how we did it. We are simply going to notice something that they did. That was very hard for students because they wanted to tell how they would do it or something different to do, but instead they had to notice something the student did. And it was very interesting to listen to them and how they tried to process through that.
Yeah, I love that. I think anytime that we can help kind of focus in on a few of those key stems and give them strong practice in which ones, then we can also do those globals. You're going to use one of those stems as you are having those discussions. But I also just love that teacher's strategy in that it's not evaluative.
Right.
It's not necessarily about giving evaluative feedback or critical feedback. It's just noticing, like helping each other think about each other's thinking. That's powerful.
Yeah.
So Amy, then what does this look like in the classroom when we're talking about live in the classroom, virtual? We'll talk about asynchronous and all of that. But what does this discussion support really end up looking like?
So I think it can look like a lot of things, right? It can look like those sentence stems. It can look like the word walls. It can look like the classroom discussions that we lead and that we have. For those out there that are familiar with the 5 practices for orchestrating productive mathematical discussions, it can definitely look like that, which is probably I don't even know how many 30-minute segments that might be. But it would be a lot of 30-minute segments.
Right.
It could look like that. So I think it can look a lot of different ways. But I think one of the things that kind of leading into something I know we're going to talk about that we don't think about it looking like is it can look like a think aloud. Absolutely. And so I want us to talk about that because in the classroom, both physically and synchronously, it can look like a think aloud, and asynchronously, it could look like a think aloud. And so I know that a lot of elementary teachers use think aloud, but I think sometimes as we get into the older classrooms, we start to lose that think aloud. And I really think a lot of it is because our teachers haven't been introduced to it as much. Maybe their college professors never used it, but it is definitely a valid instructional strategy for our middle school and high school kids. And right, a think aloud, for anybody that doesn't know, is simply you voicing over what you're doing as you are working on a problem, thinking about a problem. And so I think you have a sample for us.
I do. Yeah, it really is narrating your thinking, and it leads to us, it leads to reflection, which we know is, one of my colleagues, Andy McNair, used to always say it's the 4 C's plus 1 R. You have to have that reflective component so that students can begin to generalize and transfer and really be able to grow regardless of the circumstance and the level. And so think alouds are really, really powerful at any level. I mean, we know in our coaching work, sometimes when we're working with teachers, just giving them an opportunity to think aloud about an idea or a strategy or something that happened in the classroom is sometimes all they need. We don't even need to respond during that think aloud other than being an active listener. Sometimes just that alone can help them identify the next right step, or help us as coaches identify where there might be some gaps in understanding and some areas that we can start to hone in on. And that's why video is so powerful, because teachers can then see their lessons of instruction and then go back and think aloud about that with their coach. But we have an example. This is one that you've created in one of my favorite tools, Show Me. We were just talking before this show about how Show Me was the thing that got me started on blended and flipped learning. So I love that it's still around. That was way back when there were Gen 1 iPads. So, all right, tell us a little bit before we hit play on this example.
This is a problem from 6th grade. It comes from Open Up materials, and it is I think I closed the problem out. So it is a 6th grade. It's from the ratios and percentage unit, and it's a problem that is one of their problem-solving lessons that comes after they've learned several strategies for solving percent problems.
Okay, I love that. And I want to invite our audience, as you're watching this, please feel free to make comments. If you've got questions that you want Amy or I to respond to as we're kind of looking through this, and then after we watch this example, put those in the comments. Amy, we're going to watch the whole clip, correct?
Yeah, we're going to watch the whole clip, and then I'm going to have a question for you after the clip.
Always making me think on my toes. Okay, I'm going to take notes. I always know to have a notepad and a pen ready when I meet with Amy. All right, here we go.
So here we have 2 problems about Han and Claire. They're going shopping, and they each have a coupon. And so I have to answer each question and show my reasoning. So Han buys an item with a normal price of $15, and he uses a 10% coupon, and I have to figure out how much he saves by using the coupon. And so in this case, I know that I can find how much he saves by multiplying the percentage of the coupon times the price. And because the percentage of the coupon and the price are friendly numbers, I'm just going to multiply, right? Because 15 times 10%, and I take my 10% and I turn it into a decimal, just like that. And I know that 0 times 5 is 0, and 0 times 1 is 0. I know that 1 times 5 is 5, and 1 times 1 is 1, which gives me $1.50. So I know that Hans saved $1.50 by using his coupon. Now, when I get down to Claire's question, though, she buys an item with a normal price of $24 and saves $6 by using a coupon. And I have to figure out the percentage of this coupon. Now, these aren't very friendly numbers, and I have to go backwards to find that percentage. And so with this one, I'm going to use a double number line because it's going to be the easier way for me to do that. And so, let me get my, oops. So, let's get our double number line drawn. Oops. Somehow I have lost my pencil. Hold on just a second. There we go. So I'm going to draw my double number line. And as I draw this double number line, I remember that she paid the full price. She didn't pay the full price, but the full price was $24. And we know that that means that that's 100% of the price. And now I look at it and I know that she saved $6 by using a coupon. And I have to figure out what percentage that is. And so I'm going to start looking at different percentages and figuring out what that means. And so my next easiest percentage, I think, is let's look at what a 50% price would be. So at 50%, that would be $12 off. So I know that it's not that, but I also know that half of 12 is 6 and half of 50 is 25. So if she saved $6, then and $6 is 25%, I know that her coupon must have been 25% off.
All right. So my first question for you is a question I would ask a kid after showing this, which would be, so in the first problem, you noticed I didn't use a double number line. Why do you think, or what do you think would have happened had I used the double number line with the same strategy that I used in problem 2?
Oh, well, I know that I noticed you used the double number line because, see, I'm using some of these stems over here. Anyone noticing that? I noticed because I noticed that you used those double number lines because those numbers weren't friendly, and you didn't use them in the first problem because you said they were friendly. The math was going to be, it was the simplest way to do it. So you could have done the double number line, but it would have taken you a long time because you would have had to get all the way down to 10%, and you would have had to try to move up. You also didn't have I don't think you had all the information to be able to do a double number line. Did you? I've never used a double number line. You did. Yeah.
But okay, so let me ask you.
Okay.
When I went from, so I just set up a double number line the same way, 15 and 100.
Uh-huh.
What would have happened when I went to 50%?
Oh, because 15 doesn't split easily. So it would have been difficult. It wouldn't have been as easy to do. You would have had a lot more decimals to work with as opposed to just the first one.
Right. So when I said that problem 1 had easy numbers, Problem 2 had easy numbers too, but the easy numbers were for a double number line.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because it's also helping me think about when to use a specific strategy, right? So when we talk about the importance of not just students having lots of strategies that they know how to use, but they need to know when to use them. And I think this is a great example for that.
Absolutely. And that's right. That's what I want students to take out of this, is that I can use a double number line for both of those problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But in problem 1, it becomes much more difficult to use a double number line.
Right. Right.
Than it does in problem 2.
Yeah.
In problem 2, that double number line is easy peasy and quick.
Yeah. I love that. Something else that I love, and I'm gonna reshare my screen here just to be able to flip between tabs, is I also noticed that you used in your Think Aloud example, you used some of these sentence stems. Like I heard you mentioned, I know, because I know this, I've decided to do this, or I'm going to do it this way. And so, or this makes me think. So I really love that in your Think Aloud, you're modeling the use of some of those sentence stems as you're describing that. So it's good stuff.
Absolutely.
I love it.
So, right, if what I wanted kids, and it would depend on what I wanted kids to get from the Think Aloud.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wanting them to get the idea of how we have a conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm going to pull out the sentence stems that I use. Am I wanting them to take away the fact that there are different, not only are there different ways to do problems, but we need to look at the problem and decide which way is the best way for the problem? Then I'm going to have the conversation that we just had about, why would I use a double number line for the second problem, but not the first?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I want them to look at and listen to the math vocabulary I use, then that's a different conversation we're going to have about that Think Aloud that I modeled, right?
Yeah.
And in the classroom or in a synchronous environment, I would probably not have taped that Think Aloud.
Right.
And it would have just been something we would have done together, and then we would have talked about. In an asynchronous environment, then I have to take the time to, but it really, with the Show Me app,
Mm-hmm.
it took me however long that video was.
Yeah. Yeah. 4 minutes, right?
I'm going to say times 2, because I had to play with it a little bit.
Right.
So it took me 2 takes. But
2 takes, but you can like pause with
Yeah.
the Show Me app. You can pause and then start your recording again, and
you can.
yeah.
And so, but it didn't take me that long to record something that I felt comfortable with, and that I was able to share, and that I could then send out to my students and have ready with whatever questions I wanted to be able to send out for them to think about.
Yeah. 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 And again, that's the thing I've liked about all of the routines and strategies that you've shared for these math language routines is it's not like, and I was actually just talking about you and the previous episodes with one of my 6th grade math teachers. So I love that you gave a 6th grade example today that I'm working with. I was like, have you heard of math language routines? I said, I'm not the expert on it, but I have one that I've worked with on our show. So go check it out. And I said, but what I love about it is it's not like you've got to learn something completely new. A lot of these are things that you are doing them, but it's just thinking differently about it and being more intentional. Like I love what you said about it depends on what you want to get out of the students in their thinking, as far as what question you ask and how you use that Think Aloud. And I think that's really smart.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to remind folks that you can download the tips and some of the resources. We're going to add the link to the sentence frames document, but again, you can find those a dime a dozen anywhere. But you can download this from the Coach Replay Notes and Takeaway course. So we'll put that in the links already in the comments. Kim did say she loved the questions, great questions that we had on there in that example as well. So let's talk a little bit more as we kind of get ready to wrap up. So what does bringing this back to MLR number 8, how does this Think Aloud really support that? What about the Think Aloud supports that language routine?
So within the Think Aloud, you are modeling those discussion supports. You're modeling the use of those sentence stems. You're modeling the use of the vocabulary for your students. And really, those are the two biggest things. You're modeling, you know, the sentence stems and the vocabulary use so that your students can hear what that sounds like. And particularly if you have a class that is not doing well with producing that kind of language that you want, then a Think Aloud would be a good way to help them understand what that sounds like. And, you know, the other thing would be that if they're not having good discussions with each other, bringing in an aide or maybe the title teacher or somebody else in the building that has time that can be there so that you guys can have a math conversation together and model what that looks like and have a Think Aloud together.
I love that. It's a great way to use another adult in the classroom, right?
Yeah. And so that kids can really see what it looks like. I think so often we think kids understand what some of these things look and sound like, and they really don't. They have to be modeled for our children. And so I think that's the big support in a Think Aloud for MLR 8 is that they get to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like I love that you have that reminder. Our students, they know how to have conversations, but those are social, right? They can talk about Friday night's football game. They can talk about what they did over the weekend. They do a really good job of using social cues and having conversations with each other, right? That's right. More, congenial versus collegial conversations, academic conversations. They still need support and modeling and scaffolds for that. So yeah, if your turn and talks, your small group discussions are, not really making you very excited, or they're kind of a little bit disappointing in your eyes, then it might be time to add some discussion supports to that, no matter what subject area you're in. And so those are some simple ways. And I love that you've shared, we've talked about a couple of ways to introduce those and the ways that they can be used. I want to go into one more, because I know we have so many people who are still working online or in a concurrent hybrid model, and that may be the case moving forward as well as we look into the 21-22 school year. And I know you mentioned that example that we just looked at was an example for asynchronous, but any other ideas for how the Think Alouds can look during asynchronous learning? Because I know my brain's already spinning a little bit.
So, I think Flipgrid, right, would be
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I know, I love Flipgrid.
Yeah.
Flipgrid would be a great way to not only model a conversation, but a great way to have ongoing conversation between students.
Yeah.
So, and giving them that opportunity to show something, explain it, and then somebody else respond to it. But again, right, we've got to make sure that students understand how to use Flipgrid, first of all. Then we have to make sure that they understand what they're to say about each other's work. Yeah. And you could even, prior to that, it could be the teacher models the Think Aloud, because you can put that video
prompt, right? You can model the think aloud and then have them go do a problem and create their own think aloud and just do teacher feedback, but they could still see each other's before you start having them have those conversations. So I think that's a great use. That's immediately where my mind went when I started thinking about think alouds and asynchronous, or just the remote aspect. Flipgrid's a really great choice for that. I know that there's others, so put them in the comments if you've got other ideas for this. But again, it doesn't always have to be the teacher doing it. At some point, we want we're modeling them so that students can do the think alouds better as well, and share their thinkings and then have those conversations. So we've got to get to that point too with that. Now, I also think that recording your think alouds for your students does several things. Let's just talk a little bit about video for just a moment with that, because one, it allows them to go back and rewatch and re-listen. So maybe, in our example, you asked me the question, and if my mind wasn't thinking much about that, I could go back and rewatch how you did those two problems and think now with that prompt in mind. It's also, though, a really great way to get feedback on your think alouds, teachers and coaches. Like, ask a teacher to record a think aloud so that you can then give them feedback on how to strengthen that model of a think aloud for their students. Is that something that you've done in your work, Amy, as you're working with teachers?
It's also a really great way to engage families. So as you think about posting that think aloud where students and families can access it, if I'm a parent looking to help my students, I can look at that think aloud and go, oh, now I know what your teacher is telling you. The teacher's not telling you you have to use the double number line. Your teacher's telling you when it makes sense.
Yes.
Use the best strategy. In that case, it was the best strategy, but it's not always going to be. Yeah.
Or again, like I was just thinking, I think I know the double number line. I think I've used that double number line, right? But it's been a long time. So as I was watching, I was like, oh, I completely forgot about that strategy. If I even knew it at all, I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that. But you're absolutely right. With 3 online learners and the parent of those, my husband and I do watch some of those videos with them, so we can go, oh, okay, here's what you need to do. Or we're like, oh, that's new math to me, so we'll learn it together. But that family engagement, you're absolutely right. And you don't have to be remote learning to do that, right? We're all going to be able to use our websites, and LMSs are going to be, learning management systems are going to be a thing in every classroom. So I love that.
Yeah.
Well, so many great things around math language routines. And again, you can all download and take away your own notes and takeaways. We've done the heavy lifting for you. We put the big pieces, big ideas from today's session. We'll go in and add that sentence stem resource. You can follow Amy on Twitter at EduOptimus1. Of course, like and subscribe to Sibme as well, so you never miss a show. But Amy, anything else before we go? Anything else for our audience?
I don't think so. Just give yourself grace as this year wraps up. I know that it has been a very stressful year. I have a classroom teacher in my house, so I'm not in the classroom anymore, but my husband is, and I understand. And so give yourself some space and some grace and take a breath, and we will get through this.
Well said. Absolutely. And if you haven't had your spring break yet, make sure you rest. If you have had it, hopefully you got to rejuvenate just a little bit and hang on to that energy throughout the rest of this school year. And we are just so excited to have all of you watching the Coach Replay Show. Feel free to share this with teachers if you think it'll be valuable with them. And we will see you all next week on the Coach Replay Show. Thank you, Amy, so much for joining us again. I know we'll have you back. We've got new content now, it sounds like. We could do lots of these. So I love it.
Thanks for having me. I had a great time, just like always.
As always, you made me think on air. I love it. Keep me on my toes. All right, y'all. See you all next week.